MediSoft. They've decided to write a new version called MediSight, but they come from MediSoft. So the two names there. Stuart's joining us from, have you come up from Leeds?
Not from Leeds,
Not
no,
from Leeds.
from Lincolnshire.
Lincolnshire. Okay, right, thank you. To train us this afternoon and show us. So we'll be here for a few hours. Obviously, if you need a toilet break or something, they're down sort of beneath the lecture theatre. Can I also introduce Alex, who's our NUF trainer, who we'll probably be seeing lots more of. And Larissa is our project manager, who's doing a sterling job in trying to keep us all going and all going forwards. So there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes with lots of different teams. And we have to remember that previously, when we brought MediSoft in, we did it very gently. And we fell back to paper if anything didn't work. Mr. Pandit will be laughing there at us all, but this time we have to go home on a Friday and say goodbye to MediSoft, and on Monday we come in on MediSight. You can't do a sort of graduated, Narayan does it one way and Rasha does it a different way. It's got to be cut over on one night, so it's going to be one weekend. So it's going to be really important we get this right. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Stuart, who can take us through MediSight. Thank you.
Testing. There we go. Wow, this is new. I normally used to do training on Teams, so this is a bit of an experience for me. Yeah, thank you for the introduction. Yeah, my name's Stuart. I'm one of the clinical systems trainers at MediSoft. Sorry for the confusion with the fact that obviously old system or current system is MediSoft, and we're now changing it to MediSight. But yeah, the plan is to show you through a demo today, specifically for MediSight. So Alan sort of raised a few things that you'd like to see today, and I'm going to try and incorporate that into it. Don't think of this too much as training. Think of this more as more of a demo about what the system can do. I have had a brief overview of the sort of initial process maps that have been created, so I kind of have a vague understanding of how you work. But primarily today, it's more just going to be ease you in, show you what you can do, what you can't do. I'm going to try and cover as many roles as possible. So how I thought about setting this up today would be that I would split it up in different user roles. Primarily, I'm going to go through the nurse interaction or nurse involvement with the system. There may be some encounters today that I show you that you may think we might not inevitably end up using that. That's fine. Just sort of take it in as a potential showing you what the system is capable of, more so much of this is exactly what we're going to be doing. Then I'm going to move on to your clinician involvement. So we'll go through the consultation, what's currently called the clinical assessment, and then we're going to show you some operation templates. So I'm going to try and show you different sorts of pathways as well. I'll primarily sort of cover the cataract pathway, but I will also cover some specifics within medical retina, glaucoma, VR. They're the main process maps that I've got at the moment. So I'll try and show you some different encounter templates for those. And then towards the end, we will cover the virtual pathway, so the virtual review. I think I can see that you do medical retina, glaucoma, and VR as a virtual review. So I'll just cover or do a general overview of the system itself when it comes to virtual review, and then from there we can tailor it through to the specific pathways. All right, so obviously, like I said, I normally do this on Teams. So when I'm on Teams, I say like, oh, if there's any questions about the session, raise your hand. It's more of a virtual raise hand, but I guess today we can actually do some physical raise hands. So if there are any questions throughout the session, do not hesitate. Pop your hand up, and I'll stop what I'm sort of saying or doing, and hopefully should be able to answer any questions that you've got. All right, so let's jump straight into it, I guess, then. So do you want to kick off the recording, Larissa? It's already going. Oh, great. Okay. So we'll start off with the very basics. So like the first 10, 15 minutes, I'll spend sort of going you through how to use the system, how to search for patients, what the patient overview looks like, and how to sort of navigate through the patient's record. So we'll start off nice and easy. Okay. So this screen that we're greeted with here is what's referred to as the MediSight home screen. Now, as soon as you log in, this is exactly what you'll see. Now, depending on the role you are, there may be certain aspects of this homepage that are more beneficial to you than other roles. But we'll start off primarily with the sort of most important and the most used section on this sort of home screen, which is the Find Patient facility. All right, all you need to do is simply with your cursor, click into this search box, and from here you can start typing out using your patient's hospital or NHS number. All right, as soon as you type in a sufficient amount of numbers, it will then show you a patient preview. It won't show you anything until you type in the sort of the set amount. So if you have like 6-digit numbers, or if there's letters and numbers, it won't show you anything until you've typed out the full number. All right, but as soon as it does, it will show you a patient preview like this. And from here, you can click anywhere on this sort of patient tab here, and it will load the patient's record. So that's what we refer to as a quick search, and that's what it will default to straight away. If you don't have a patient's hospital NHS number, by clicking on this advanced button here, just to the right of the quick search, it will expand the view, showing you the opportunity to search for the patient using their demographics. So you've got things like surname, first name, postcode, date of birth. As long as the patient exists, was Cerner, wasn't it, that you've got? Is it Cerner? Yeah. As long as the patient exists on Cerner, their patient record will be viewable within MediSight. All right. So after searching for patients, we then move on to the recent patient list. So any patient records that you search for and you load into on a particular day, that patient's record will then appear in this recent patient list for the remainder of that day. So the main premise of this is so that if you do need to jump in and out of a patient's record, you can do so from this recent patient list. They'll only appear here for the day. As soon as it comes to the end of the day, the list will then refresh, ready for you to sort of compile a new list. We then have incomplete patients. So there's certain clinical encounters within MediSight that give you the option to be able to save for later. The main ones that we're going to be covering today is the pre-op assessment, the consultation, the operation encounter. There are others that give you the opportunity, but they're the main ones that we're going to be covering today. As they're larger documents or larger clinical notes, the system does give you the opportunity to save for later. Any documents that are saved for later will be stored in the incomplete patient section. Don't worry too much about the sort of warning symbol that is appearing on my test system. Generally, these documents will stay in this save for later state for 4 weeks, but this can be extended or decreased depending on it's really down to your choice how sort of long you want them to stay in that save for later state. But simply from here, you would select the patient's record and it will launch you back in, and then from there you can pick up from where you left off with the clinical note itself. I will demonstrate today how to save for later. It's really easy to show, so we can go through that today. For review is the old virtual review functionality. Still can't tell you why it's the old version is on the system. There is a small user case from it. It's more for if you want a clinician or maybe an F1 to send a specific document through to a consultant to review, then you can do. But like I said, it has very niche user cases now. So I would presume that when it comes through to go live, then you pretty much won't use this for review functionality. You'll be using the new virtual review functionality. Then we have draft documents. So as you can see, I'm quite behind with my documents in my test system, but similar to incomplete patients, you have draft documents. So not only can you save the clinical note for later, you can also save the letter for later. So when you are in the letter and you're editing it and you do want to amend it, or you don't have the opportunity, sorry, to sign it off, the system will also give you or allow you to save that document or save that letter for later. So depending on what you're saving for later, if it's the clinical note or if it's the actual letter itself, is depending on where it's going to store on your home screen. All right, and just to let you know, these documents, these draft documents, will stay in this sort of state indefinitely. Now, there are different ways that obviously you can pick up on this. Sometimes when we mention that, we get a lot of users that are quite worried, or what if I miss a document? What if it stays in this state forever? We do have obviously the audit suite, which you can pull reports on documents that are in that save for later state and how long they've been in that save for later state. So you can always generate reports based on the documentation it is that you're recording, and it's how long it's been in that state. So audit suite, unfortunately, won't be something that we'll be covering today, but when we come through to go live, when we go through the specific training, we will cover audit suite and how to use it. All right. Right, so moving to the top right-hand corner. So you should be able to see sort of where it says system user. Just envisage when it comes to go live and you're logged into MediSight, this will display your name. So I don't know, we sometimes have scenarios where maybe you're in a clinic or a ward area, and sometimes there's a generic PC that's used by different members of staff. If you ever need to sort of verify who is logged into that MediSight at that time, just always check in the top right-hand corner, it'll display their name. All right, but by clicking on your name, this is where you can access your sort of front-end user profile. So those of you that are clinicians or consultants that produce letters, by coming through to your user profile, this is where you can come and set up a digital signature or a sign-off, sorry, or add an electronic signature into the system. All right, this isn't default, this isn't mandatory. You don't have to do this. This is more just a bit of user functionality that will sort of enable you to sort of customize your letters or however you want to do it. But yeah, once you've applied that, you click on done. Staying in the top right, you'll see tools. By clicking on tools and then settings, this is where you can access your front-end diagnostic default. So those of you that record visual acuity, refraction, intraocular pressure, when you're recording those tests in MediSight, the system will ask you to specify what notation it is that you're using, what refraction type, what pressure method it is that you're using. If you primarily work under a subspecialty that tends to sort of use a particular notation, so for example, if you work under glaucoma and you primarily always use Snellen, then by coming through to the tools and settings section, you can come through and set up your VA notation from here. And all this does, and all this means, is it just saves you from having to click and specify exactly what notation or method it is that you're using. The system does actually give you the facility to change it if needs be. So if you are a nurse that maybe works across multiple pathways and maybe medical retina, you use letter score or logmar, and maybe in glaucoma or cataract use Snellen, then the system does give you the opportunity of jumping between those regardless anyway. But this is something that during go live, we will maybe not insist, but encourage users to set this up, because it definitely does save you a few clicks when it comes to actually recording the information itself. Okay, so what we'll do now is let's jump into a patient's record and let's sort of give you a tour of how the patient record works and how easy it is to navigate through the patient record itself. So I'll load this patient. Now, this is a patient that I've been using quite frequently over the past couple of weeks. Been doing a lot of virtual training. So I've populated their patient record with quite a sort of wide array of different clinical data across different pathways as well. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to access this patient from my recent patient list. So all I need to do is simply click on their name, and it's going to launch me into their patient's record. Now, this might seem quite overwhelming, what I'm showing you. I'm going to try and cover as much as possible and try and make it not as daunting as possible. Sort of main things that we get whenever we show trusts or hospitals MediSight, one thing that we always tend to get regardless is how much more user-friendly the system is compared to Medisoft. Medisoft was written and coded on sort of very old software, and it sort of hasn't sort of lasted the test of time, whereas MediSight is a lot more easy to navigate. It sort of functions in a way where you can have multiple different avenues for navigating through the patient's record, whether it be using sort of panels or hyperlinks. It will give you the facility of sort of navigating through the patient's record quite seamlessly. All right, so what we'll do is we'll try and cover this in great detail. So first things first, I would always advise you, whenever you load a patient's record, always check the patient banner at the very top. This is just an extra level of verification just to make sure that you've definitely pulled through the correct patient. All right, once again, it's just standard demographics. So it'll be the patient's name, their date of birth, their hospital and their NHS number, as long as it's switched on, and then their address. Now, one of the sort of first major improvements that we talk about when we come through to the patient's record is allergies and adverse reactions. We are aware that currently in Medisoft, they are quite hidden. It is a bit of a chore, a bit of a task to actually come through and check what the patient's allergies are. We've almost done a complete 180 now within MediSight, and we've almost put them everywhere, really. So you can see them straight away when you load the overview. If you're a nurse administering drops in clinic, you can see them there. If you're reporting medication, if you're prescribing medication, there's always constantly sort of a reminder to sort of specify you can check. Now, it's not sort of mandated to say check the allergies. It's visible. It makes it easier for you to actually sort of check and see what the patient's allergies are. And all you need to do is simply highlight over this section, and it will display what they are. It splits up. Obviously, this patient hasn't got a sort of a wide array of allergies, but it does actually split it up into a easy readable format as well. I don't know how clearly you can see this, but you will have your drug-related allergies at the top, and non-drug will be sort of, there'll be a gap, and your non-drug will be located at the bottom of this section here. Now, the system does also have the capability of adding flags or utilizing patient flags within the system. The main scenarios where we see that is if you maybe want to sort of utilize flags for maybe dementia patients, or maybe you have patients on a study cohort or safeguarding risk. Doesn't matter sort of what the scenario is, we can sort of utilize patient flags from the system. We have like a whole host of different flag icons that we can send across to you, and from there we'll work alongside you guys determining exactly what flags it is that you want to utilize. So when we tend to mention flags, especially when it's this early on in sort of the go live or the training process, we do get sometimes a lot of good feedback about, oh yeah, actually we can utilize it for this scenario, for that scenario. It's probably not something that I'll take today, but it's something that obviously we can sort of make contact with you and make sure we're sort of aware of how you would like to utilize this different aspects of the system. I will add a flag to this patient's record as well, so I'll show you how it does appear on the patient's overview. All right, then we come down to the actual overview itself. So how I sort of describe the overview is it's just a culmination of different parts of the patient's record that's pulled through onto one screen. So think of it almost as like a summary of the patient's record. Now, like I said, it does seem initially quite daunting. To run it back, we sometimes get questions regarding the actual overview screen itself. Can we change it? Can we sort of move things around? We don't want this on the overview. We would like to sort of utilize this, or maybe have this in the patient's record or the overview. We are aware of sort of customers that would like that facility. We're not quite there as of yet. So what I'm showing you today is basically what you get. But in terms of customization, there are things that you can do. So sometimes we get user roles that say, well, we don't really need to see about 75% of what's on this screen. How can we sort of minimize it because it's too busy for us? It is quite easy to do that. All you need to do is simply click on the heading of a particular section that you're not interested in, and it will minimize it for you. So it does go from being initially quite daunting to actually it's not that bad. These are the only sections that I'm actually sort of bothered about. So you can simply just minimize certain sections if they're just not applicable to either your specialty or your role. All right, and to sort of get them back and expand them, you simply just click on the section itself and it will expand and show you the information that you need to see. All right, but I'll keep everything expanded for this particular demo. I'm going to try and cover as much as possible in terms of what different parts of the overview can do and can benefit you. All right, so first things first, we'll go over care pathways. Now, it seems quite trivial to mention care pathways, but it's definitely worth mentioning. From here, you can see exactly the pathways that your patient is currently admitted to. You can see the last activity. I don't know how clearly you can see this, but you can see the last activity, what it was, so what the clinical encounter was, whether it was an assessment, a consultation, an operation encounter, the date it was recorded, and also the user that actually recorded that information as well. And you can see that per pathway. Now, one good thing about pathways or MediSight when it comes to sort of patient pathways is currently in MediSoft, there's an issue where if you do have a patient that is on multiple pathways, if you try and discharge them from an individual pathway, it will unfortunately discharge them from all pathways. That's no longer the case in MediSight, so you can sort of freely discharge patient from individual pathways without worrying about affecting any others. So that's another improvement that's worth mentioning. We then come down to current problems. So current problems is synonymous with diagnoses. So anytime a patient has a diagnosis recorded in the system, it will pull through and be visible from the current problem section. Now, this is sort of the first time within the demo that I like to go in and show you expanded views of the patient's record and how easy it is to sort of amend patient's data itself. So what I'm going to do is I can either click on this go to problems or click on problems on the left hand side on the panel, doesn't matter, but I'm just going to go through and show the expanded view of the patient's diagnoses. Now, from this view, it splits it up and will show you your patient's current history of and past diagnoses. If you ever need to amend a patient's diagnoses, you can do so by simply clicking on the current diagnoses, clicking on edit, and then from there you can amend it, whether it be changing the status from current to past or history of, whether it be duplicating it to another eye, whether it be just flat out deleting the problem, and you also have the facility of adding in any free text comments as well. Now, everything is audited. There is sort of generally a back-end audit trail in the system, but also you get that front-end audit as well. You can see the last user that updated this diagnosis and the actual data was updated as well. So you get that with all of your diagnosis currently in the system. Now, you can also filter this system as well, filter this view. Primarily, it will default sort of show your eye-related diagnoses, but you can also view non-eye. We're currently training a customer, and one of the issues that they had in MediSoft was that it was quite hard to specify a non-eye related diagnosis within MediSoft. That's no longer the case. MediSight is really easy, and you can actually do it. One of the major improvements is the fact that you can actually add to a patient's record outside of a clinical encounter. Currently in MediSoft, if you want to record any sort of information regarding the patient's record, you have to go and create a clinical assessment to do so. That's no longer the case in MediSight. For example, I'll show you adding a new diagnosis. So if you maybe wanted to indicate that patient has a non-eye related diagnosis, whether it be headache, high blood pressure, migraines, these are just the quick searches or the quick list that you can quickly access, but you can also use the search field at the top. All you need to do is type in at least a few characters, and it will then show you anything related to that. Yes. Yeah. No, unfortunately. Yes. Yeah.
Am I going to be in trouble?
Have you tried MediSight yet? Because obviously the system.
Yeah, but it's that you may have a diagnostic list.
Okay.
Diagnosis list that goes, left cerebral artery aneurysm,
Yeah.
hyoid stent.
Mhm.
It's never going to be on your list. Plus, it takes hours and hours and hours to do it this way on patients. So the fact that on MediSoft we can do it as free text saves about 15 minutes of doing drop-down menus.
Okay.
We've always done in ophthalmology, past medical history, past ocular history, and often medications as free text.
I mean, there are certain sections which give you the opportunity of adding free text to those sections, so both past medical history and that. So you could do that. That's fine. You may be surprised. We do get a lot of questions regarding neuro-ophthalmology. So definitely. Okay. I mean, when you do add a diagnosis in, you can then add information to it. So if you maybe do want to put a specific diagnosis that's maybe related to it, and then from there document further information. I mean, I'll just use one of these random ones here, but from here you can then specify further free text comments if you want. Maybe a workaround. This may be something that we could look into greater detail outside of this, but we do sometimes get, well, we do get a lot of queries whenever we do neuro-ophthalmology or train neuro-ophthalmology, whether it be sort of regarding the presenting complaint or the actual sort of diagnosis or history that you're searching for. We are aware that it may not appear in the system, but you'd be surprised. We update the system all the time, and whenever we get notified of these diagnoses that don't appear, we can sort of freely add them to the system. Okay.
Which months away.
Yes.
I spent ages telling MediSoft about all these funny names of things and all these new drugs and weird stuff that was going on, and in the end, it just gave up because it was so difficult to maintain a patient record. And that's where the free text is so important.
Okay.
I don't know how to use that without having a free text facility.
Okay, that's definitely something I could take away and sort of look into getting back to you and see what workaround that we could potentially offer. Okay. Well, what I can demo today is actually we do actually have clinical order sets as well within the system. So if you do have a frequent sort of order set that you tend to apply. Okay. When it comes through to reporting, I mean, you can just retext this into the outcome of the actual document itself. But when it comes through to reporting medication, it's not as, so you refer to prescribing or reporting?
When you take
Yeah. So, yeah. So reporting is actually, there is a lot of differences. So when it comes through to reporting now on MediSight, there's no mandatory option to specify route, duration, or that. Within MediSight, it's simply just, all you need to do is specify the status. So if it's a current medication or a past medication. When we get through to reporting, I will demonstrate it. There's
point. The thing we will do with that is then try to see what the standard procedure will be. How do we do it with what's available? So yeah, but we'll have to work something out, you're right, that doesn't break you.
On the spell check, for example, on Microsoft, you can add to it.
Yeah.
So that if you have a variant spelling, for example, you can add that to that.
Mm-hmm.
So for diagnosis, can we not have a system where we add to and that uploads to your?
Oh, okay, like almost like a manual upload. Can you recognize this?
That should, sync with your
Yeah.
your server, and that can apply across the board then.
Yeah, well, it's a good point, and it's definitely something that I could take away. It's not something that we currently have within the system in terms of being able to manually add diagnoses. Yeah, the system can be sometimes, well, I won't say funny, but it can be very particular when it comes to sort of specifying diagnoses on a patient's record. It will only allow you particular findings that it recognises to actually be specified as a diagnosis. But we can sort of look, there are a lot of sections which you can obviously acknowledge free text and add free text comments in. But yeah, we can look into that when we get to it. That's absolutely fine. But yeah, if there are any other things that you sort of want to document with me, we can sort of definitely take them away. Yes.
Do you have like an other category? You can in there maybe.
Not when it comes to adding diagnoses in, unfortunately, no. Well, it's not fixed. I mean, the list is potentially massive. So, one thing I do actually do say sort of during training especially when it comes to migrating customers about this particular scenario, I always tend to sort of say, wait until go live, and you'll be surprised the differing or the options that MediSight actually gives you in terms of allowing you to add or specify history, diagnoses, and if there is anything during go live that you definitely can see that doesn't exist in the system, whether it be a presenting complaint that you're trying to add or whether it be a diagnosis itself, then we can definitely look into raising that. But like I said, you'd be surprised these options that currently don't exist in Medisoft that may actually exist in MediSight. But yeah, we can sort of, it's probably not a session that we can go through searching for every single different bit of history or diagnoses. This may be something that we can obviously take outside of this. So when we start training, we can look into this in greater detail. But yeah, so diagnoses. So one thing I like to, like I said, demonstrate is the fact that you can freely add non-eye related diagnoses to a patient's record without sort of the rigmarole of going through and creating a clinical assessment to do so. So let's jump back to our patient's overview. So the next section that's worth going through is your patient's planned events, both the planned procedure and the planned visits. Now, this is something that I'm going to demonstrate to you today in terms of utilising the planned visits in the system. And this is how you will generally maybe refer a patient to a different pathway, or maybe you want to see the patient again for a follow-up. And this is where you'd be able to leave specific instructions that you'd like to take place during that that follow-up or visit itself. When we actually get to creating the consultation, I will show you how to generate a planned visit. In terms of where the instructions will lay or where you'll be able to find them, it will be visible from the overview screen here. Then we come down to the plan section. Now, I like to sort of spend a bit of time on the plan section just to sort of go through and sort of describe exactly how this differs to MediSoft. And to be fair, it doesn't really differ that greatly. So currently on MediSoft, if you wanted to check your patient's most recent outcomes or exactly where they are in their patient journey, you would use the management plan system or the management plan section. And from there, you can see your patient's most recent outcomes. You can see what was documented, whether it was by the nurse, whether it was by the clinician. Regardless of who the user role is, you'd be able to see what was actually documented from the by using the management plan section. That's now been moved to the plan section on the patient overview. So from here, I mean, I haven't got any that are in great detail, but from here, you can see all of your patient's most recent outcomes. Okay, so you can, whether it be from a virtual review outcome, whether it's something documented on a virtual review, whether it was a management plan that was generated, whether it was a discharge summary from an operation counter, all of your sort of patient's most recent outcomes will be visible from this plan section here. Now, my patient only has about 7 or 8 recent outcomes. I only started adding to their patient record on the 11th of April, but this view here will show up to anywhere from about 15 to 20 of your patient's most recent outcomes. So you'll see them all from one view from this plan section here. So it's straight away from the overview screen. If you want to see straight away what went on during my patient's recent visit, you'd come through to the plan section to check that. Okay. Moving back to the top, you can see eye procedures. This will indicate your patient's recent procedures that have been completed. Regardless if it's injection, if it's phacosurgery, if it's laser, everything reviewable from here. Now, when I get to here, sometimes I get queries or questions about injections or intravitreal injections. The good thing is, obviously, now that the go live is taking place towards sort of the middle to latter half of the year, you guys, I presume, will be moving to a new version of the system, which will have the new injection planning template, which is due to come out in the next couple of weeks. Unfortunately, as it's not out yet, I can't demonstrate it, but it may be something that obviously we can arrange and send our documentation about. Now, I'm going to talk you through the injection planning today, but it may be a case actually when it comes to go live, you're in a different part of the system or different version of the system that may utilize it in a different way. So if we do have any questions or alarms about injection planning, I will definitely take them, but it may be a case where a lot of your fears may be sort of corrected or disappear when it comes through to sort of seeing the new version of injection planning. But at the very most, or the very least, this eye procedure section will show you your patient's most recent IVI on this sort of current part of the system. If you want to see all of them in this sort of very version of the system, I would come through to the planned events section on the left and come through and see planned and completed. My patients only had one dose of IVI, so it's only displaying one intravitreal injection, but if a patient had more, it would see and display them from this view here. Back to the overview, we then have our patient's history, so both ophthalmic related and standard medical history. We have our patient's current medications, both eye related and not. This is the first section where you can come through to sort of view your patient medication in their entirety. As you can see, it does split it up into an easy readable format. You can see current and past medications. You can filter by eye related or not. You obviously can prescribe from here, but this is generally not where you prescribe from. But this is where you can actually come through to report medication. So regarding medication, I can show you now actually how you report. It is really easy. When it comes through to reporting medication, so scenario is patient comes in and has some medication that they've already been prescribed by their optom or their GP. When it comes through to actually reporting medication within MediSight, it is just a case of the only thing you need to tell the system is the status, so whether it's a current or past. Question?
Yeah, just regarding that section.
Yes, let me jump back.
Yeah, just
Yeah. Yeah, so
get rid of the injection and just see the cataract of the mind.
yeah, so in our 126, which is a new version of the system, which comes out in 2 weeks, we're going to have a complete separate page for injection. So you'll definitely have that view. Like I said, we are working on documentation and some interactive videos regarding that. So it may be something that we can send across to you guys. And from there, you'll be able to view it and see exactly what the new version of the system is going to offer. Yes. Yep.
Digitally dictate things into the boxes, it won't recognise it.
Okay.
To type it in. We'll be able to digitally dictate medications and things into these boxes.
I know that dictation doesn't work, or I know that dictation does work in the letters. What software have you got? Is it Dragon software? Is it Big Hand?
Modal Fluency Direct.
Okay, it's not one that I've heard of, but I do know. I do know that especially the letter screen does have a lot of capabilities of interfacing with third-party software. I definitely know that Dragon software. Yes. Yeah. Okay.
Whether digital dictation will work. Correct.
I think it will work. It will just be, as in, it will write on in the box.
It doesn't now.
Interesting.
I can take that query away, but like I said, we don't tend to get queries about does dictation work outside of the letters in MediSight. So it might be something that I can test myself. I have some dictation devices.
We can test it. It's fine. I've got because I've got the right software sheet, so we'll just test that.
Cool. But in terms of reporting, one of the issues with MediSoft when it comes through just to reporting medication was the fact that you did need to specify the route, the product, the dosage, the frequency. When it comes through to reporting medications, this is separate to prescribing. When it's just reporting medication, the only thing that you actually need to tell the system is the status. So if it's a current medication that they're taking, or if it's a past medication it is that you used to take, and that's it. So from there, you can click OK, and it'll pull it through to this pool here in the top right, and you can add numerous. It's not just one at a time. You can add multiple. It is literally 2 clicks. So you can either search for them within the quick list. You've got the search field at the top here where you can search for them, and then from there you could select the medication. So in terms of reporting, it isn't as long-winded as it is currently in MediSoft. And from there, you would just click on confirm all, and that will then apply all of those medications in one click through to the patient's record. All right, so reporting is a lot more or a lot less time consuming in MediSight. But in terms of checking whether we can sort of free text or free type things over this, then we can sort of test that and look into that. But so that's reporting medication. Like I said, there's lots of different filters where you can filter by BNF or the start or the drug itself, and it will sort of change the view itself as well. And once again, it's worth mentioning that known allergies once again appears. So like I said, we have done a good job of making sure that you don't forget or don't miss out on sort of checking the patient's allergies. But back to the overview, just to finish off the last few sections. You have your patient's diabetic status, which will display here. I will demonstrate in terms of how to add a diabetic status to a patient's record. If you record HbA1c in the system, this will display here as well. You have a summary of your patient's visual acuity. Now, one thing that we see, especially myself during go lives, is patients themselves actually really like this view being from the beyond the overview straight away. Sometimes when you're talking to a patient, and we see this firsthand, and you tell them that your vision's gone from 612 or 618 to 650, it might not mean a lot to them, but when you can actually show them a summary chart and see, and they can actually visibly see whether their visions are getting better or if they're getting worse, it actually sort of sinks in a lot more. So we do tend to get a lot of positive feedback from patients themselves and saying, oh, actually, they like the fact that they can quickly see that. Yes.
So children get older, you do
Okay.
different long tests.
Yeah.
Can you float over and see what test is used?
Absolutely, yeah. So my patient at the very top is honestly displaying their most recent set of visions, but I think this patient, yeah, so regardless of the notation it is that's used, it will plot on this chart for you. So whether it be logMAR, whether it be letter score.
But if it's logMAR, because we record on logMAR, but it's a different test, so it's like a single picture or
Oh, predicate pictures or something like that.
And,
Okay.
so, and obviously, as you move on, it'll look like a vision's dropped, but it's because they're on a hard test,
Okay.
2 on the same day, so you can compare.
That
Does it only show one, your primary vision?
it does, yeah. But if you actually go through to this is a good segue. So if you actually go through to the expanded summaries view, you can actually see your patient's visual acuity on full screen. He says, if it loads. Is this going to load for me?
Just because if not, then it can look normally like your vision.
Yes, yeah, 100%. Yeah, from the summaries, once it decides to load for me, you definitely can show your patient's expanded visual acuity, and there are ways that you can filter by the correction method it is that you're using. There may not be that, well, there's definitely not a way that you can filter by the method, but you definitely can filter by the correction method itself, and the different notations it is that was used. I may just need to close down my system and reopen it. Just bear with me, guys. Technology. There we go. Okay, so you can actually see an expanded view of the summary chart itself, and it will show you not only your patient's visual acuity, but it will also show you intraocular pressure as well. But from here, like I said, you can filter by the correction method itself. Out there's not really much else that you can actually see in terms of filtering. But it's definitely something that I could definitely take away. I've never had that query before. I do know that obviously, specifically with pediatric patients, you do a lot of additional methods. Okay. Okay.
So when you go there, it's kind of essential.
Okay.
See if everything's getting better or worse.
Yeah. So how would you currently document that within MediSoft? Just physically write it. Oh, so you're all right. Okay. Yeah.
And it's useful to see if it's getting better or worse, whereas if you treat amblyopia, if that's not going on, it might be that it's not getting better with patching, but they're on hard to test.
Okay.
So then it
Yeah.
looks like it's gone down, so you have to do the equivalent test as well.
Okay. That's definitely something that I can take away with me because that's good to know.
It's almost, you just need it basically floated over for it to show what test you.
Yeah. No, that would make sense as well. Yeah.
Single case or.
Yeah.
Like.
I'll take that away with me because that's actually I would do a lot of strip business and pediatrics training, but I don't tend to get that one. But that's a good one that we can definitely take away.
That summer page, you just see oh, that's got down.
Yeah.
Oh, they're running hard to test.
It makes sense. Okay, that's definitely something I'll take away with me, 100%, and I'll look into that. To be fair, if I get some time today, I'll show you the orthoptic assessment itself, if that might be something for some use to go through. Yes.
Start.
Yeah.
You know that it's
two of the same type, so basically
Yeah.
you've done two tests.
Two lines.
Not currently in the system, but it's another thing that I could sort of look into. So it's almost like as a way of cross-referencing, like right. Yeah, and then what? Okay. Oh, okay. It is in terms of documenting, right? So similar to, so this was actually for the first time raised to me last week. So we currently have things like count fingers, no perception of light, but both eyes open was I only had that for the first time. So it is something that literally last week was raised as a change request. It's really easy to add to the system. Yeah. 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 Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
So because we need log mark and treatment, can you change it so it reads as log mark?
So in terms of
No,
the most recent, right, unfortunately not. The currently in this current version of the system that I'm demoing today, if the visual or if the notation was Snellen that was used, it will only display Snellen for you. But yes, but you've got this graph down here. So yes, yeah. It is something that gets raised to us frequently in terms of that notation conversion. It is so I guess we are aware, but we're currently not there. It's funny doing these sorts of training because obviously I'm showing you on a version of the system that you guys might not have. So the fears or the change requests that you guys are raising with me may not actually be valid when it comes into training, but it's definitely worth noting. Regarding one that you mentioned in terms of visions, I want to be able to change so that this is my view, regardless of the notation that was used. It's something that we are looking into in terms of how we can change that within the system, but we're not quite there as of yet. All right. In terms of summaries, though, I did want to show you a few things, and I did have a separate system loaded, but it did kick me off when I jumped off the Wi-Fi. So what I want to do is I want to show you what summaries is theoretically capable of within the system itself. So I'm going to show you some visual field related stuff, and I'm going to show you, I would presume that you will definitely have a HFI interface into MediSight. So my local system doesn't have this, but this is the beauty of having different systems which do have interface data in. So if I go back into my summaries and specifically go through to the glaucoma tab, what I'm going to show you is the facility of being able to interface visual fields into the system itself. So you've got two tabs, glaucoma, retina, and if I just show all view, because I think these were recorded quite a while ago, you can see interface visual fields in the system. So I would presume like it's almost a standard now if you do have or record visual fields, having a sort of interface in the system is almost like a standard sort of build now when it comes to most go lives. But this is generally what you'll see. Now you can obviously differ between sort of visual field index or pan standard deviation. You can filter by eye. There's different ways of turning data levels on. You can see your patient's visual field or projected visual fields 5 and 10 years into the future as well. And once again, you can see your patient's intraocular pressure plotted over time at the very bottom. But not only the main differing view compared to glaucoma retina when it comes to pressure is on the glaucoma screen, the screen will also, or IOP section will also display your patient's cup to disc ratio plotted over time as well. So you have the facilities here. But like I said, data labels, you can choose to turn these on. I forgot to actually mention these at the very start, that these actually do exist and you can actually turn these on. It saves you from having to highlight over the section here because by having data labels on, it would just quickly just display what the data is. Similar for VAs, operations, visual fields. Visual fields makes it a bit messy, but yeah, you can see that information from there. This patient had a large amount of visual fields over such a very short space of time, but yeah, it might not be that clinically accurate because this is just a test system of ours, but I like to sort of utilize and show this aspect of the system. One question that I've got for you guys, what image viewing software do you use for things like OCTs? Do you use HiX, HiX2?
HiX and Optos, sorry.
HiX and Optos. Is that going to be...
Not integrated.
Not integrated, okay, that's fine. Okay. But yeah, so in terms of visual fields, those will be integrated. But yeah, that's exactly where you'll see it. You'll see it from the summary screen there. Now moving on to events. So we sometimes get a lot of queries and about the event screen. One thing that I always try and reiterate when it comes through to, especially for Go Live, when it comes through to Go Live week, there would be theoretically, there'll be no reason that you'll need MediSoft anymore, especially if it comes to sort of viewing historic data. As soon as that cutover period takes place, all of your patient's historic data will be migrated across from MediSoft through to MediSight, and it will be viewable from this specific event screen here. All right, so regardless of the letters, the clinical notes, everything will be viewable from this event screen. Now, there's a few things that are worth covering from this section here. First one being the fact that any of these documents, regarding if it's a letter or clinical note, can be downloaded. All you need to do is simply highlight the document is that you want to download, and you can click on the download button in the top right. That will download said document to PDF, and from there, I don't know if you ever have any scenarios where you ever need to sort of download a document, attach it to Cerner, or if you ever need to internally send the document as an email, by downloading a PDF, it will enable you to quickly and seamlessly send that document. You can also locally print from this screen. Now, this is separate to sort of batch printing that your medical secretaries will do. If you ever need to, say, for example, scenario is patient wants to take home their patient letter with them. They're desperate for it. They don't want to wait until it gets sent out. You can find the letter from there, locally print, and as long as you've got a printer set up to your PC, it will locally print that document. And then from there, obviously, you can carry on giving it to the patient.
Sorry, Stuart, that definitely doesn't reset the batch print. It's
no,
marked as batch
no.
print.
But one good thing to note though is in terms of medical secretaries, if a medical secretary, and this isn't just related to medical secretaries, but anybody, if you select a letter and click on details, this will actually indicate to you whether the document has been either locally or batch printed. So it won't remove it from the batch print queue. It almost sees it as a separate entity. The document will still remain on the batch print queue, ready to be sent out to either another copy to the patient or maybe to the patient's optom or any other practitioner or contact that they need to sort of be copied in. But in terms of checking to see who signed off the document, who, if it's been locally or batch printed, you can select the letter itself and check the status or the details to see exactly where it is in its journey. But yeah, anything from here in terms of functionality is really easy. Like I said, I've got some obviously demonstrations of biometries today that have sort of pulled through an interface to my system. This is what a biometry template would look like. I'm probably not going to dive into it yet because we're jumping the gun a bit, but when we come through to sort of showing you specifically the cataract pathway, I will sort of go through and show you how to select a lens, how sort of easy it is to sort of apply it to a record. Yes?
So just go back to what you said, just 1 second.
Oh, yeah.
So I never wanted to send any MediSoft letters ever.
Okay.
At the moment, every single time I had to click on every time I save something, I
Yeah.
had to stop it sending anything.
Oh, yeah, that's no longer the case. Is that the case for a particular pathway, or is that just you specifically? You never want your letters? Yeah, that's fine. We'll switch it off for you. So that we are jumping the gun a bit with letters, but in terms of letter templates, we can set up your templates. It's all automated, so that's fine. So because it is automated, we could just flat out turn it off. So if you don't want letters to send or anything like that, we can turn it off. Now, obviously, we can do it per pathway as well. So as long as we're going to have a specific neuro-ophthalmology pathway, we can make sure that in neuro-ophthalmology, letters never get sent or get printed anyway.
We do it by user.
Oh, that is a good question. I think it's only per pathway, but I will show you when we get to settings. I'll tell you, it's just, you don't have to cancel anything. It's just a tick box, so you can just untick it. So yeah, it's a bit easier. But yeah, so that's the events list. Actually, I'll jump back to my other patient and I'll demonstrate the visual field viewer as well, because this patient's got visual field. So we do also have a specific visual field viewer, and from here you can cross-reference and check your patient's visual fields plotted over time. You can filter it by eye. So my patient's currently got just the right eye, but you can filter it by both, by an individual eye as well. I don't think my patient's got all the patterns selected. There we go. So yeah, you can see both eyes at the same time. From here, you've got these separate tools here that you can sort of navigate and check and move through the different patients' visual fields. One thing that we tend to get, especially during go lives, is there's a lot of confusion. Obviously, majority of the time, I presume that you would cross-reference and sort of compare one eye to the others, or one eye first visual field or most recent visual field to the oldest. Just be wary of this sync navigation. It tends to catch people out. I don't know how clearly you can see this, but down the right-hand side, every time that I change my bottom visual field image, it changes the top one as well. He says, if my system wants to respond. I think my system just crashed. It does do that. I'm not fibbing, but yeah, you can when you change your visual fields or change a visual field, if that sync navigation, it's just catching up now. When that sync navigation is ticked, it will change both of them. Now we sometimes get this query. We just want to leave the most recent one at the top or the oldest one at the top, and just change the other subsequent visual fields. That's fine. Just make sure that this sync navigation is turned off, and as long as that is turned off, you can leave the specific one at the top, the most recent one at the top, and then just sort of change the bottom one, and it will, like I said, it will just fix that top one at the top.
Two things, Stuart.
Yeah.
Can we set a default for that and the exclude undeniable?
Yeah, so as long as you, well, yes, I think we can. But either way, if we don't, then as soon as you untick it once, it will never retick again. It always remembers that you've unticked it.
Okay.
But I'll take that. I mentioned that to Assad in terms of, can you flat out just turn it off by, so it never turned off.
Set a default,
Yeah.
so we all start on the same.
Yeah.
Can you actually open the original visual fields exported by Zeiss?
Yeah.
So on the current one, you can.
Yeah.
See,
You can see
let me see that.
So so are these visual fields that would have been in?
So in MediSoft,
Yeah.
you get two copies of it. You get the visual fields and the visual fields viewer,
Right.
and then you get what looks like an attachment icon. So you can open that. And part of the reason that's useful is because it's got gaze tracking, which it looks like MediSight probably doesn't
So
either.
you can see the viewer itself, but we do also have the specific attachment. Now, this may be a bit janky as it is just a test system, but
Yeah, okay, so you can do it through.
Yes, so it will also pull through the events. Now, this is one view. You can use events, but have you ever used eyebrows as a way, you know, the facility of the tool eyebrows? That's another way that you can filter through and see all your patient's visual fields, and it will show you the PDF document, not the actual viewer itself. That's one thing that you could use. So look, for example, like this. So you can see all your patient's visual fields. So I think there's different ones that are plotted here. But yeah, so you can utilize that.
That's great, thank you.
All right. Yeah, yeah, moving on to eyebrows. So eyebrows primary function is it's enabling you to view sort of multiple documents, or sorry, at least two documents alongside each other. So if you are in a scenario where you need to cross-reference a document alongside each other, you can do so by sort of selecting it within the list. Like the example we just showed on the previous screen, you could cross-reference the PDF template. I'm showing you here a consultation clinical note, but you could also sort of cross-reference letters. Now that's one user case. Another user case that we started advising customers now is the fact that, unfortunately, in the events list, if your patient is on multiple pathways, let's say, for example, this scenario here, patient they have 13 cataract documents, 1 corneal, 1 general, 8 medical retina, and 3 assigned to no pathway. If I only wanted to see the specific medical retina related documentation, I could deselect everything, just select the medical retina pathway, and then within this document type section, it will only show me documentation related to the pathway that I've selected. Obviously, you can't do that from the events list, but like I said, this is another way that you can utilize eyebrows as a way of just filtering through your patient's documents and just showing you the pathway specific stuff that you actually need to see. So yeah, that's how you can utilize eyebrows in different ways. We've gone through problems, medications. Patient's details is by default where your patient's demographics will be stored. One thing that I mentioned here, if you ever notice any errors with a patient's record, don't try and update them on MediSight. I mean, the majority of the access for that will be locked down anyway, but if you do have access to amend the patient's record on MediSight, don't amend it if the scenario is the patient's details are incorrect. Patient's demographics will be pulled through from Cerner. So if they're incorrect on MediSight, they'll be incorrect on Cerner. All you need to do, as long as you've got access, update the patient's details on Cerner, and then within a couple of minutes, it will push that update through to MediSight itself. So if you try and update on MediSight, the update only works, or the sort of the how to word it, the communication only works one way. So it works from Cerner to MediSight. It doesn't work from MediSight back to Cerner in terms of patient details anyway. This is also where you'll be able to locate your patient's allergies, and that it's sort of full screen. So once again, it's split up into drug and non-drug format. You've got reactions details. You can actually go in and amend a patient's allergies that already exists. So from here, if you need to update the patient's eye or non-eye related reactions, you can do. It will always tell you who the user was that added in the allergy and who the user was that most recently edited it. If you want to flat out add a brand new allergy, click on the blue button. If it's a drug-related allergy, you need to sort of type in at least 3 characters. If it's non-drug, you can just select latex, stick and plaster, or just free text something in if it differs from those two. All right, and that's it. In terms of mandatories, that's it. You don't need to add anything else. It's all optional, whether you want to add things like the source, the eye or non-eye related reactions. It's completely optional to you guys. And this is, like we briefly mentioned, flags. This is also where flags exist. In terms of adding flags to your system, this is something that when it comes to go live, we'll do like a system admin session where we'll go through and train some internal super users in terms of how to create and add these flags to the system. But in terms of actually applying a flag to a patient's record, it is really easy. Simply come through the flag section, click on add new flag. You'll have a whole list of different flags, obviously, if you want to utilize them. Select the flag you want, and then just specify the duration, whether it's just for the day, whether it's indefinitely. We can actually default these to specify or auto select a duration. So I think my large print letters one is set to the duration is set to indefinite. So I'd have to specify what the duration is. But from there, you can just apply it, and then it appears in the patient's overview from the very top. So like I said, this scenario can be very beneficial in terms of dementia patients, study cohort, safeguarding risk, the sort of possibilities are endless in terms of how you want to utilize flags in the system. There's no sort of structured way. Any flags that you want will create them for you. Okay, so there's a lot of talking about the overview and the patient's record. Let's actually start going through and start creating some clinical data. Same patient. I've prepped another patient before. He says, no, I can't find them. There we go. So this is another patient that I've used a few times, but oh, I'm okay to use this. This is fine. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through creating some clinical encounters. Now, the first couple that we'll go through, like I said, will be specific nurse related. So we'll go through the standard assessment and then we'll go through the pre-op assessment. Once we've done with those, we'll then go through the clinical assessment or the consultation, and then we'll be in the operation encounter. We'll try and replicate and show you as many different procedure defaults as possible in terms of, I can try and show you today some VR surgery, some phaco defaults. I'll try and show you the IVI, and I'll see if I can show you some laser defaults as well. But first things first, so whenever it comes to creating any sort of clinical data in the system, first you need to manually search for the patient and load the record like I've done here. And then you simply come and select create new in the top left-hand corner. Okay, now within create new, this will show you all of the encounters that you have access to. Now, I'm logged in as a system admin user today, so I have access to everything. You'll only be able to see the clinical encounters that you need to or can see for your particular user role. All right. Like I said, your list when it comes to the go live, or if you are doing UAT or testing or anything like that, your user role will be set up correctly. So you'll only see the encounters that you need to have access to. But in terms of the first scenario we'll go through like a standard sort of face-to-face visit. And I'll do it initially for the cataract pathway. So what I would do as the nurse, obviously in my head, patient has physically attended their appointment. They've been sort of checked in by the receptionist. And now me as a nurse is going to see the patient and record some visions and some pressures as well. And I can show you some of the other related stuff as well. So all I do is load the patient's record, create new, and then I select the option assessment. All right. I can jump into that one. That's fine. Now, my template is set up differently. I wouldn't say it's standard. In terms of standard, you'll when it comes to the go live, as long as you are standard and don't have any sort of differing activities that appear, you will only be able to see the visual acuity, refraction, drops given, and the IOP activity. So these four here that exist. All right, now I've added for other demos, I forgot to remove them, the fact that I've pulled through the past medical history, but it is a good way of sort of demonstrating the fact that MediSight isn't as sort of rigid as what Medisoft was. If, for example, in certain pathways, you want your nurses to be able to record different information to a different pathway. One good example is maybe specifically in glaucoma, you want your nurses to be able to document whether the patient's RAPD or not in a particular eye. That might not be as applicable in maybe medical retina or cataract. So what we can do is we can specifically tailor the glaucoma assessment to look one way, and we can sort of differ it to how the cataract assessment or the medical retina or the strabismus assessment looks like. So we can tailor any sort of assessment depending on per pathway as well. But what I'll do now is I'll go through and just record some sort of standard diagnostic data. So in terms of how it works, it is really easy. Generally, everything as soon as you load it will be minimized like this. And all you need to do is simply click on the activity and it will expand and show you a view similar to this. All right, so I think mine is currently set to Snellen, so that's fine. So all I would do here, if I was recording visual acuity in Snellen, is I would simply select the drop down, and from there, you can either select the patient's visual acuity from the list, or you can simply just retype it as well. So you can just simply just type in 6/18, however it is, and it will just show you the option in the list. Now, you've got your different correction methods as well. So you've got unaided, glasses, pinhole, contact lens, refraction. So you can record those for both the right eye and the left eye. You can record up to 3 separate sets of visions on a particular activity, but you can obviously add in others, which will enable you to add further as well. So if we try and make it at least a bit clinically accurate, let's record one under unaided and then another we're using pinhole. So we can demonstrate that. All right, so like I said, you can record up to 3. By clicking on more, this is where you can add any free text notes. If you want to document any issues that you had with recording the visual acuity data, maybe there was some sort of discomfort when recording visions in a particular eye, this is what you can utilize here. We mentioned a bit ago in terms of your additional scores, in terms of if a patient's visions are really bad, things like count fingers, hand movements, perception and no perception of light, those do exist. They're just at the very bottom of the score itself. So that's where those exist. Methods, if you ever want to apply a particular method it is that you're using. So we mentioned earlier in terms of orthoptics or children, in terms of you've got your linear and single crowded K pictures. And in terms of how they appear, it will simply just document it on the actual summary and show you that this was the method that was used. All right. You can freely, if you, like I said, if you are a nurse that works between different subspecialties, you can jump between your different notations by clicking on more and then selecting the different notation it is that you're using. So like I said, if you work between 2 pathways, maybe for example, medical retina, and you use logMAR or letter score in medical retina and you use Snellen and others, you can jump between the notations by clicking on more and then selecting the notation it is that you're using in that pathway. All right, now you might see me clicking on done. It doesn't really do anything. All it really does is just minimize that section and just show you an overview or summary of the information you've recorded. It doesn't save anything. It just makes your screen a bit more manageable. If you have all of these activities open at once, it does make the screen quite messy. So what I tend to do after I've completed every section is I just click on done and it will just minimize it and just show me a summary of the information that I've recorded. So that's something just to be wary of. I'll demonstrate refraction. As far as I've seen through the process maps I've seen, I don't know if they're completely finalized. It doesn't look like refraction is utilized that much, but I can definitely demonstrate in terms of how it is used within the system or recorded, sorry. So in terms of refraction, mine is defaulted to auto refraction, but you can change between different things. So maybe specifically within your pediatrics, you can do sort of subjective and Brett Cross as well for your adult and your child patients. I'll just keep it as auto refraction initially. Now, it is a lot more simpler than, well, not simpler, it's a bit more straightforward than recording visions. It is a case of just manually entering the patient's vision refraction score into the system. Now, this is one way of doing it, but we also have another way. You can click on this add previous, and by selecting this, it will show you a history of all the refraction that had ever been recorded for your particular patient. And if their refraction score was the same as what it was, for example, 6 months ago, you could theoretically just select that previous refraction score and copy it into the current note. I don't think I have any for my patient, but you would select it in this list and then select the option copy and using current note, and it will pull everything through for you. So it does massively speed up the time it takes to record refraction. You can also add in past refraction. If you have a scenario where maybe a patient has some refraction recorded at their Optom, Vision Express or anything like that, and you want to document it in your system, you can do by clicking on add past refraction and from there document it, and that's absolutely fine. This works exactly the same way as what it does for intraocular pressure as well, so you can also add past pressures into the system. Oh, sorry. Oh, I can't see because of the light. Yeah, so yes. Yeah, so we've got retinoscopy. By clicking on more, you can add in your patient's ret cross as well. Can quickly demonstrate that now. Something like that. Obviously, you can turn on cyclopedia. I don't know how clearly you can see that, but you can turn on cyclopedia as well. And you've got subjective as well for symmetry. If you want to for symmeter patient's glasses, you can do. It's all available in there. It's just a case of sort of selecting it. Okay. So in terms of like prescribing glasses, like glasses prescription or. Okay. That is a good one. I can take that away with me. I've not had that query before. What I'll probably do is, with these certain questions I can't answer on the spot, I'll probably just get you to come to the front at the end and I can sort of write them down on my phone or jot them down on a notepad or something like that. But yeah, I can definitely look into that. I would imagine, is that something that you can currently record in MediSoft? Just free text it. Okay. Yeah. We do have a specific glasses prescription activity. Whether that would work, I don't think it exists in the. I can't see it. Does it not exist here? Yeah, there we go. So we do have a specific glasses refraction where you could go through the prescription. Whether that would be something that you could utilize, is that? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah, you've got a complete free text note. So you can add anything to this. We have a specific plan section as well, which appears primarily in the clinician's consultation, but anything that you document in this plan section, which can be added to the assessment, can also appear and be viewable from the patient's overview. So if you wanted to document something specific, it may be a case where we do initially, when it comes to go live, might just need to replicate it and free text it. But if you wanted it so that it was visible really easily for other clinicians to see straight away, you could document it in something like the plan section, and then straight away from your patient's overview, they can see exactly what it was that you sort of documented from that particular scenario or session. But you also have a free text note section. If you don't want it to appear in the overview, you can just free text note something into the actual assessment itself. All right. So that's refraction. We have a specific drops given in clinic activity. Now, don't worry too much about the drops that I have, the dilating drops that I have for my test system. We'll make sure when it comes to go live, like the specific or common drops that you use on a day-to-day basis will appear on this list. We can actually separate it as well. So you can have your common drops in this list, and we can also have a show more drops. I think mine is, yeah, empty. But the drops that you use maybe not as frequently, we can add this show more drops list. So the list isn't completely massive and doesn't scare anyone, but you can also have a show more drops list as well. But in terms of how to utilize or use the activity, it is a case of just specifying the drops it is that you're actually administering and whether it be right, left or both. So for example, if I'm sort of administering tropicamide to both my patient's eyes, I click on that section there, and then from there, it's now sort of logged that specifically when I clicked on it. If you're ever doing it retrospectively, so you did this 5 minutes ago, you can just click on the time and then micro adjust it if you want to be completely accurate. This is also where you can delete as well. So if you accidentally clicked it twice or you didn't mean to select it for the right eye and just the left eye, you can just delete them as well. If you are struggling to dilate, you can just click on the repeat button, and that is just another way of you demonstrating or telling the system that you're repeating this dilation of this drops. And once again, you have free text comments per eye to document anything that you need to document or any issues that you've sort of discovered when recording or of the drops itself. All right, then we have IOP. So this is going to show me everything, unfortunately. I might just delete this out and make this like a blank patient. There we go. So mine should have been set to eye care. So you have your different methods that you can record for your patient. So whether it be eye care, I'm not sure if you use any other intraocular pressure method, but you can record it here. In terms of recording pressures, it is really easy. You simply just enter the pressures that they're receiving for both eyes. It will indicate a previous peak as well. And if you do exceed, I think it's 24 on the system now, if you do exceed that peak or the previous score, it will flag it for you as well. So you can change between different, we often get the question, okay, how would I add, in that same visit, how would I record another set of pressures for the patient? By clicking on add another, it will enable you to select and record a separate set of pressures. So if you record one set using eye care, maybe another set using Goldman or Rycar or AirPuff, you have the facility of recording that, and it will appear sort of really seamlessly on the actual record itself. All right. By clicking on more, this is where you can access recording patient's spirometry. So within glaucoma, if you ever need to record a patient's spirometry reading, you can do so within the CCT section here. And it will update at the top and show you an overview just from there. And it will give you an indication as to whether your patient's central corneal thickness is either thin or thick. I will show it here, actually, showing it as thick. There we go. All right. This differs, maybe more sort of applicable to glaucoma, but you can also input any statuses as well when recording of pressures. If you're doing things like post-massage or post-needling, you can also indicate that within the system. Any status that you want to document in terms of recording any previous pressures or current pressures. And similar to refraction, you have got this previous section, which will display and document any previous pressures that have been recorded on the system. And you can add past IOPs, like I said, if you have a scenario where maybe some pressures are recorded in by their optom or in the community outside of them recording in the hospital. So those are the 4 standard activities that we have, or that we tend to see within the assessment. From, like you can see, you can add additional ones, like we've added the planning, the glasses prescription. You also have past medical history. We have standard activities that you primarily quite often see in the assessment, things like observations, if you want to record observations. This isn't anything, obviously, this isn't anything that's definitely happening for Go Live. I'm just sort of like to demonstrate what the system can actually do. We get questions about things like, oh, do you have a inbuilt sort of BMI calculator? Yes, we do. Quite easy like that. So yeah, there's lots of different capabilities and facilities in the system. And yeah, you can utilize it like that. All right. So next stage of the assessment would be, or sort of the final sort of completing of it, is just telling the system that you have completed it. So all you need to do that is click on the big blue button which says finalize. The assessment, unfortunately, doesn't give you the opportunity to save for later, because it tends to be like a quicker, or it tends to be a document that tends to be, you can move through it quicker than you can maybe like an operation encounter or a consultation encounter. Unfortunately, you don't have the facility to save for later, but anything that you do finalize, if it isn't completed, you can just go back and edit it once you do get a chance to complete it. All right, but by clicking on finalize, that's you telling the system that you've completed the document and you now want to sort of move on and see the next patient. It will jump you through to the event screen, showing you an overview of the information you've recorded. If you do notice any errors with the assessment that you want to edit, by clicking on the assessment and clicking on the pencil, it will launch you back into the assessment, enabling you to re-edit it. As far as locking of documents, it differs. I don't know what it's set up for you guys in terms of it. Well, it tends to be anywhere from a day to 3 days, so it will range anywhere between there. I don't know if this is conversations that have been had.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, I wouldn't hold too much for the editing of stuff. Once you've saved it, you need to make sure it's right. And that's to do with our exporting to Cerner. So it's probably going to lock extremely quickly because it will export to Cerner almost immediately. So any edits you make won't update Cerner properly.
Okay.
Yes, Max.
You say that's not finalised.
So the doctor's consultation, I think.
Yeah, you can.
Yes.
Not the assessment,
So there's
unfortunately.
going to be, we're going to have to be really clear, and I can't be clear with you today, but there'll be buttons that if you click, that will be it. You will have saved it and it will not be editable. And others that you can save temporarily and come back to later, because especially in clinic, we appreciate workflow is patients move around. You know, you can't necessarily see someone in one go. Helen, you.
Can I just ask where the orthoptic bit will sit in? Is that more like a consultation or an assessment?
We have a separate encounter called the orthoptic
So
assessment.
that is, can we see it from the because you're saying
Yes,
yes?
you can.
so that's
100%
more
you
like-
can.
It's more like an equivalent.
Yeah. Yeah, the orthoptic assessment is obviously a huge document, so you can save that for later. Yeah. Off the top of my head, the only ones that don't give the option to save for later is the assessment and the note, and that's it. Things like the pre-op assessment that the nurses or the pre-op nurses may report can, and I think everything else can as well. It's just the assessment and the free text note that you can't. I do apologise for that. But yeah, try and be sort of clear and concise that you are making sure that the document is accurate as possible.
And although we've got used to it on computers, if you think going back to paper, once you put that ink on the paper, you sort of couldn't get rid of it again. You couldn't undo it. I know you could tear a whole sheet out, but you know, it's not actually that far from where we were.
Yeah, but you can half do it.
No, exactly. No, same.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. No, Helen, safe is different. But I mean, you know, saying, oh, well, when it's saved for those, you know, be that finalized or not. Yeah.
Is that how it's going to be set up, Alan, in terms of immediately it will export it to CERN and not a particular point at night or the next day?
Without going into really boring details, at the moment we've got it set up that at 8 o'clock at night, the export becomes live. Right. It doesn't really make sense because if you document something at 8 o'clock at night, which I appreciate is less common, it exports immediately, even in MediSoft. So you end up with a copy straight away. So why are we saying that's okay at 8 o'clock at night, but we're not at 4 o'clock in the afternoon? It doesn't really tally. We just need a single process that we all work with. So that's the reason we've gone for a short export. It also means that when you see someone in ophthalmology clinic and then they go to neurology or dermatology or somewhere else in the hospital, immediately they will have the record, which obviously at the moment they get nothing. Narayanan.
Yeah, if you do export it, I mean, if you finalize it, gets exported, and if you have to change it, do you export it again? How does it work?
It will be we'll have to confirm exactly what we can do, because you may well end up having to phone IT and getting documents removed, and we will have to work that one exactly out.
So we do know that in terms of the export that it extracts, if it is at a particular point of the day, it will. So say, for example, like Alan said, if it is at 4 p.m, you can edit that document 30 times up to 4 p.m, and it will only send or only extract the most up-to-date version of that clinical note or letter. But it all depends on when that document extract takes place. All right. So if it is, like Alan said, 4 p.m, then if you do this document at 9 p.m. and you notice any errors, then you have. I mean, you don't want to stick in the mindset that, oh, it's okay, I've got until 4 o'clock to change it. You obviously want to try and make your documents as accurate as possible. But in terms of what the system will do and how the extract will work, it will only send the most up-to-date version of that letter or clinical note when it comes to extract time, whether that be at 4 p.m. or 8 p.m. All right. In terms of letters being sent, I mean, this will be the same with any sort of EMR that produces letters. In terms of GPs as well, if it is past that stage where the document's been exported or the letter's been sent as an e-copy, this would work the same with any system. You'd have to contact the GP and say, obviously, disregard that letter. I'm going to send an up-to-date version of that letter. But obviously, we want to try and make sure that our documents are sort of as accurate as possible. All right, so just to sort of allay any fears, those of you that are, like I said, that produce documentation in the orthoptic assessment, in the consultation, operation counter, you do have the access to save for later, and I will demonstrate that when we get to a document that you can do that. So it's not a case you have to finalise it. If you haven't completed it, you can save for later. Oh, yeah. No, so yeah, it will pull through. So. Oh yeah, you can add your own. That's fine. Yeah, you can enter refraction in the consultation, in the orthoptic assessment. You can pull the refraction activity through to pretty much any sort of encounter that exists. But in terms of, I don't know if I'm confused. Enter it. I don't know if I'm getting confused, but in this scenario here, when I load this consultation, you're going to see the vision, the refraction, the pressure pull through to my consultation, but I can add my own as well. You have the opportunity of doing either or.
This assessment you're looking like, that's not dissimilar to the current nurse's assessment, is it?
Well, this is, yeah. We don't. Yeah, so I don't sometimes like to generalise an encounter and call it like a nurse assessment, but this is generally what nurses and HCAs will use. This is what you could theoretically could call it the nurse assessment. All right. So yeah, this nurse assessment the majority of this information will pull through to my clinician's consultation, but me as a consultant, I can record my own set of refraction, or if refraction hasn't been recorded, I can record refraction regardless. All right, I'll demonstrate that as well. But yeah, in terms of what you're telling the system is you need to tell the system finalize, and like I said, once you finalize, That's it. But you can obviously go in and edit it if needs be. Just be sort of wary and try and make sure that our data is as accurate as possible. All right, so what I'll do is I'll jump into a pre-op assessment, but I won't spend loads of time in the pre-op assessment because it tends to sort of function almost the exact same way as the assessment. And this primarily works with any sort of activity or encounter within the system. Once you know how to use one encounter within MediSight, the rest of them sort of follow suit in terms of how they work. This is how you expand it. This is how you enter data. This is how you minimize. All right, so I'll jump into the pre-op assessment and I'll show you what the encounter can do. Now, the main difference is the fact that obviously it is a larger document than the actual standard assessment itself, and it's a bit more of a, well, it is basically a questionnaire. So first things first, you can actually specify within the preoperative assessment whether this pre-op assessment took place in clinic or by telephone. And then it just comes down to sort of standard activities. Now, one thing to mention, anytime you see a red asterisk within an activity, that is indicating to you that there is a mandatory question or questions that exist in that activity. In terms of important questions, this list is completely customizable. This is just standard questions that I've got in my test system. We'll make sure one for one, copy it across. We'll make sure that the standard questions that you're currently asking in your pre-op assessment in Medisoft is absolutely replicated in MediSight as well. So don't worry too much about that. In terms of what the system can do for you, you've got standard questions that are yes, no, not applicable. We can flag certain answers. So for example, the question here, patient understands reason for operation. If I select no on that, it will flag that up as a potential issue. So we can also set questions up like that so that they flag if a certain answer is selected. But yeah, in terms of navigating your way through, just said in terms of just basic completion, just need to make sure that all the mandatory options are completed. We sometimes get questions like, or we've seen on go lives where nurses or pre-op nurses will go out and fill out every single question on the pre-op assessment. And we would sort of ask them, oh, that's quite a lot of answers that you've asked the question, or ask questions that you've asked the patient. Oh yeah, I just thought I'd have to fill out all of them. That's not the case. There are a lot of questions in here, and we can actually remove a lot of these activities out if you don't ever ask these questions. But in terms of what you have to do, it's just the mandatory questions, just the ones with the asterisks. That's it. If you have all these other questions and you never answer them, just leave them blank. It's absolutely fine. All right, but sometimes certain questions actually open up more facility for you. So for example, transport, if you specify sort of his hospital or own, it will give you an option to specify exactly how the patient is sort of making their way home. Things like discharge gives you other options for how you're sort of discharging the patient, how they're getting home, post-op visit, things like that. So depending on the options that you're selected, it may actually open it up and give you options to sort of specify further information within that section. All right, ophthalmic history. Now, a lot of this is interactive. So if for example, the patient had blepharitis recorded on the system would already know that the patient currently has blepharitis, and same for refractive surgery as well. So because this is a relatively new patient, I'm having to sort of document it myself, but that's absolutely fine. Free text comments regarding these, and it will document all your other patients' data as well in there. Anesthetic history is where you find the question able to lie flat. This is also where you can document any previous LA or GA related problems. We have these specific history related problems or questions that, like I said, these can be removed. I don't know without looking or going into finer detail in terms of if during your pre-op assessment you ever asked questions related to cardiovascular, neurological, respiratory, but these questions do exist, or these questionnaires do exist. All right, so you can find things like, because I've added that my patient's got a history of angina, it's automatically already pulled for me, and that would work for the same with anything else as well. All right, diabetic status exists here. That would have probably already been recorded by your clinician in the face-to-face appointment. We have kind of jumped past that sort of consultation stage. Allergies. The good thing is a lot of these sections actually give you the facility of jumping through to that section and amending the patient's record as well. So for example, allergies here, if my patient disclosed to me here that they have an allergy that wasn't already previously recorded, by clicking on edit, I could jump straight through to my allergy section, and from here I can start recording it, or I could just quickly record another allergy for my patient. So whether it be drug related or not. All right, and then from there, click OK, apply that to the record, jump back to my pre-op assessment, and it's now recorded that data for me. So you can seamlessly jump through to different parts of the patient's record and add information to it without sort of feeling like you have to or be too sort of regimented along the journey. Yes, I think there is. We can actually pull through past medical history. I think it is here is just other history actually. Bear with while it loads. Yes, so you've got ophthalmic history and you've got standard medical history as well, or other medical history. So these do exist.
This is the pre-op assessment though, so it wouldn't necessarily, that would be very targeted things they'd be asking. It wouldn't be the whole. So they do this at the moment and it's very targeted. It's a bit randomly targeted, but they ask, you know, have they had their left knee operated on? It's very specific questions. It's not a general past history. That would be in a separate nurse assessment.
Oh, I see, the pre-assessment's different.
Yes.
Yeah, so I actually, in my the assessment that I just recorded, there was actually a past medical history activity here that I had recorded some previous data. But yeah, you can document it anywhere. So that past medical history could have been recorded in the standard assessment, the face-to-face assessment. All right. But yeah, so like I said, pre-op assessment is a bit, it's almost the same. It's just more of a questionnaire. Like Alan said, it's more targeted questions regarding specific parts of the patient. This is more just making sure that the patient is actually okay to sort of go ahead with surgery. But I guess this is the sort of the first place that I can demonstrate the save for later functionality. So the pre-op assessment as it is quite a large document. You have the option here to select the option save for later. So by clicking on this will save everything that you've recorded so far. And this process that I'm going to show you here for the pre-op assessment works exactly the same way for the orthoptic assessment, the consultation, the operation. It all works the same. So if I click on save for later, it would jump me back through to my events list, showing me a sort of a warning of when this document would be deleted. But from here, I could close down MediSight, close down my computer, I could move computers, I could come back a week later and this document will still be here in this list. And from here, I simply just select the document it is that I want to sort of complete, double click on the yellow banner, and then from here, I can pick up from where I left off. All right. Okay, so similar to the assessment, as soon as I've finished, I simply click on finalize. And once again, that's me telling the system that I've completed the document. I now want to move on. All right, once again, showing you an overview of the information you recorded. The same as before, if you do need to edit that document, you can click on the pencil and it will enable you to edit. All right. So next option that I'll go through is the consultation. So we're jumping back a step. So if we say during our face-to-face appointment, obviously the assessment would have just took place, which we did from the prior encounter. Now we're going to move on to the consultation, or what is currently referred to as I think it's the clinical assessment within MediSoft. So same as the standard assessment that we recorded, load the patient's record, create new, and then you're looking for the consultation encounter. All right, this will launch into the consultation for our patient, or if you want to refer to it as like the decision to treat phase, I guess if you want to call it that. So this is primarily what you'll see. Now, like I said, my patient isn't a brand new patient, so a lot of information has pulled through for me. You can see things like the medical history that's pulled through, family history, social history, the visions and refraction and pressures that have been recorded by my nurses or HCAs have pulled through. To answer your question, you can just go in and record your own set. That's absolutely fine. Whether it be visual acuity, whether it be refraction, you can come in and record your own set. It's absolutely fine, regardless if refraction or pressures or VAs have been recorded before. All right. Yeah, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and cover as many of these activities as possible within this session here. Now, it may be a case where I go or cover things that you primarily won't use when it comes to the go live. Just think of this, like I said, once again, more of a demo. I'm just sort of demonstrating to you exactly what the system can do. And from there, maybe moving forward, probably not go live, but maybe moving forward, there may be certain things that you want to utilize that exist in MediSight, but don't currently exist in MediSoft. All right, so I'll try and cover those now, and then we can go from there. So first things first, I'll cover presenting complaint. All right, so I would presume that's something that you're currently recording within MediSoft. It does differ a bit. So this is what we refer to as structured data. Structured data, it's easier for me to actually demonstrate it instead of me talking about it. So let's say, for example, patient's presenting complaint is blurred vision. So all I need to do is type in at least 3 characters and it will throw me or give me a suggestion in terms of what complaint to pull through. All right, now obviously I've added in 1 there, but you can add in specific ones as well. So you've got things like glare. Let's maybe add in something like double vision. Can add these in. Now, it might seem quite basic when you add in complaints like this, but this is how structured data works differently to standard free text data. From here, with my cursor, I can simply just left click on top of this complaint. This separate ribbon appears, enabling me to add further information to this section here. So if I want to specify things like duration, so how long they had blurred vision for, is it in a particular eye? How's it been since last visit? What's their vision type? And you've got free text as well. But theoretically, within about 4 clicks there, I've been able to specify my patient presenting complaint in its entirety. All right. Now, obviously, you have the option of recording free text data in this other comment section. There may be certain scenarios where you have no other choice, whether it be a very niche or particular complaint that maybe doesn't already exist in the system. If ever those situations occur, do let us know straight away, and then we can look into or endeavour to actually adding them to the system, whether it's sort of manually or adding them as a release or during a release. But if you can, try and use structured data. Now, there's numerous pros to using structured data. When you get used to it, it is so much quicker than just free texting something in. It's a lot easier to extract structured data out of a system and generate reports or audits compared to free text data. Obviously, we can do it, but with free text data, it has to be a manual. We go into your system and manually set up or export that data. Whereas when you use structured data, it's just all sort of, it just lives by itself, and you can just generally pull reports yourself without having to sort of worry about contacting us to extract that data. All right. The only thing that's really worth mentioning is depending on the complaint that you pull through, you may get more or less options. For example, glare gives you the opportunity of specifying things like when does glare occur. Diplopia gives you the option. There's quite a few options within binocular diplopia. You can specify things like direction of gaze. You can specify duration. You can specify things like frequency. He says, I think my cursor keeps playing up. You can specify things like frequency, laterality, near and distance, and the type of diplopia as well. So depending on the complaint you pull through, you can add quite a few options to specify that complaint in its entirety. All right. Then we've got our patient's medical history, which I kind of overheard that the nurses would record this, but like I said, that's fine. Doesn't matter where it's recorded, whether it's in the assessment or here. It can be recorded in either place. I didn't really demonstrate it in the assessment before, but in terms of how it works, it is really easy. You simply just type in the first few characters of the patient's presenting complaint or previous history, sorry. And then from there, you can pull it through. The only thing that's really worth mentioning from here is if it is ophthalmic related history, the system will mandate it to make sure you specify what eye it's related to. If it's not, if it's something like standard high blood pressure, then or angina or asthma, there's no such mandatory option for that. So just be wary. If it's ophthalmic, the system will ask you to sort of specify the eye this history is related to. If it's non-ophthalmic, just standard medical, there's no such mandatory. But you can specify things like known, absent, and the onset. Yes.
Pattern and exforia and things like that.
Yes.
It looks mental when you have a list of diagnoses. Exforia, both eyes.
Yeah.
Both eyes, you know,
Yeah.
or binocular.
Yeah. So standard, but well, I could test it. I've never had that before, to be fair, but I would presume. Yeah. So you still have to specify. So unfortunately, yeah, it comes down in right and left instead of both. Yeah, unfortunately. It's also worth mentioning you can add negatives as well. So if you want to document that patients never had this, never had exophoria, never had you can also document that. Hello. Oh, okay. That's true, yeah.
In fact, that answers all my problems because
Yes, you could just free text it. No, so it may be a case you simply just straight up document it without adding in squint surgery, just straight up. So patient, patient had squint. Yeah, just free text it. All right. This is also quite good for, I mean, this is more specific for pediatric patients. You could do things like birth as well. So specify if there was like premature birth and things like that. The type of delivery as well. You will get used to it. There are some quirks. So all you need to do is type in a few characters and it will start showing you suggestions. But from things like if you want to specify exactly the child was born or anything like that, or the weight, you would just have to free text that in. All right. So there are ways of getting around it. It's not as regimented as what it may initially look like. There are pretty much free text comments everywhere that exist in all activities. Family history primarily works out the same way. From here, you just document it and then pull it through, whether it be sort of squints at maybe a mother or father's had, you can maybe do something like that. I've already sort of got glaucoma, but you can add them in. Just search for it. It doesn't have to be eye related. It can be non-eye related as well. I've added high blood pressure. Social history works in a bit more of a structured way. Things like adding in certificate of vision impairment, things like that. It's a bit more structured. From here, you can indicate if your patient's partially sighted or fully blind. From there, you can indicate the main cause. We are working on ways that you can separate this out. So if, for example, patient's partially blind in both their eyes, but it's a differing course, that was something that has been raised to us for the first time last week. Maybe it's glaucoma in one eye and maybe a dense cataract in another. There aren't any can document it for different eyes. Obviously, you have a free text comment here that you could, but there's no currently structured way of recording two differing reasons per eye. It's a case of a main cause and that's it. You don't have to select a main cause. It's not mandatory. You could just simply specify that, yes, patient is certified partially blind. That's the only mandatory, or that's the only option that you can do or want to do. You can do that as well. Okay, so structured history offers you loads of options, things like smoking, driver mobility, marital employment status, a combination of social services. Once again, free text comments if you want to document anything else regarding those particular sections there. All right, so then we've come through to our diagnostic tests that our nurses or HCAs theoretically recorded. They pulled through for us, but that doesn't mean, like I said, you can't come and record your own. That's absolutely fine. All right, whether it be, like I said, refraction, pressures, visual acuity itself, it could all be done from here. Now, it's worth mentioning here that MediSoft currently, if you wanted to leave the clinical assessment, you couldn't just leave it without sort of saving it or finalising it. MediSight doesn't do that. It sort of gives you freedom that you can sort of jump through the patient's record without worrying about saving or losing anything. So, for example, if I wanted to jump through to the overview or maybe jump through to the events list, I can do that. And the whole time my consultations remained open in the top left. And you can see this purple line here indicating that you've currently got this encounter open. Now, I completely forgot to mention the fact that the system does actually have the facility of using split screen as well. It just exists here at the bottom. I think I've only got one screen theoretically, so I can't demonstrate it, but you could have or utilize split screen in MediSight. So if you wanted one part of the patient's record open, say, for example, you want the consultation open on one screen and you want their overview or their event screen open on another, then you can absolutely do that. The only thing that you need to be aware of is split screen only works while you're in our patient's record. As soon as you leave that patient's record, split screen closes down. All right, so just be sort of careful with that. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. While she's doing her consultation, yeah. So you can have the orthoptic assessment open on one screen and consultation open on another. That's absolutely fine. All right. Then we come down to our findings. So there's loads to cover regarding findings. I'm probably not going to be able to cover everything in this session, but in terms of particular subspecialty related findings, it may be a case of I might not show you some things today, but just wait until we do some actual subspecialty training when it comes to go live, and then from there we'll take a deep dive into specific subspecialty related stuff. I'll try and cover as much as I can, but just due to time, I probably won't get a chance to cover everything regarding all different subspecialties. But in terms of how the findings work, now what you're currently used to in MediSoft is obviously coming through to a particular part of the eye, indicating the laterality, and then from there selecting a finding and pulling it through and indicating it on your patient's record. So let's say, for example, we want to pull through something like clear crystalline lens in the left eye. Now that's one way of recording it within, or one way of recording it with the MediSight, but new to MediSight is we have these search for findings section. Now, depending on the eye that you're recording it for, you could record findings for the right, left, or both. And all you need to do is simply just type in at least a few characters of the finding that you're looking to apply and then pull it through. So, for example, if you want to pull through, let's say both eyes, we want deep and quiet anterior chamber, that will apply through to the relevant section for me. All right, if I want to maybe add through, and this it's clever as well in terms of it's what we refer to as smart search. So if I wanted to search for neovascular AMD, I could just type in neo AMD and it will find that option for me. So it's not like you have to type in all the word or everything like that. You can sort of type in different characters of different words and it will sort of find the option for you. All right, so those are your two different ways how you can add them in. You may find that in certain sections, there are a lot of these findings that exist that have these ellipses after them or 3 dots. Anytime you see these 3 dots after a finding, that's basically letting you know that as soon as you click on that finding, there's a separate box that's going to come up, enabling you to enter further information. All right, so for example, if I select early AMD, it's going to give me the option to specify things like drusen, largest, number, all of that. I can enter that from there. I don't have to. From there, I can just specify if they've got drusen and it will add it in for me. All right. So depending on the option that you're selecting, it may give you further or less options. DR grade. Yes.
On that,
Yeah.
On MediSoft, you can, because if you have to choose multiple options, that left click, right click business, because if you left click, the tree drops down.
Yeah.
Yes, if you right click, it stays open for you to choose multiple options.
Oh yeah, so you can do. Yeah, so you can go through and select multiple options. That's absolutely fine. All right. DR grading. Now, I'm not going to definitely won't have the time to go through the grading form in its entirety, and this is something that we could go through specifically when it comes through to training itself. In terms of where the DR grading exists, it is just located within PostSeg. Now, when we open it, you may get some fear or some worries that it's quite a daunting document. Documentation that we can send out regarding the grading form, which I'm hoping will allay a lot of fears in terms of how it works. It may be different to what you're currently used to in MediSoft, but the system primarily works the same way in terms of how the grades work and how you can navigate through, and it will on the fly give you grades for your patient's eye. You'll be surprised a lot of times when you sort of remove a lot of these options, it does minimize a section and not make it as daunting as what it initially looks like. But like I said, this is something that primarily we'll cover or go over when we come through to some of our subspecialty related stuff. If we want to make it relevant to other things as well, we have sort of structured gonioscopy grading as well for glaucoma. We have recording things like your patient's cup to disc ratio, RVO as well. We have structured RVO recording of that within the system. If you want to record the different types of RVO and things like clinical signs and macular edema, that all exists in the system. Like I said, within these certain parts of the eye, you'll find the most common findings regarding that particular part of the eye. But if your finding that you're looking for doesn't exist, you can either what I would suggest is use the search for finding section, and then you should be able to find the finding that you're looking for. All right. Now, if your patient had ever had previous findings recorded within the system, or even in the previous system, MediSoft, this Apply Previous Findings button will appear. By selecting this option, it will show you a preview of the information that you recorded for the previous clinician consultation. If you wanted to pull this through, then you'll just click on confirm. That would then pull through all those findings in one fell swoop. If you just want to individually pull through some findings, you can come through to the particular part of the eye, and from there it will show you the previous findings that were recorded. And if you want to just pull them through, you just click on the plus and then it will apply and pull that finding through for you. So if findings have been recorded before, you can easily just pull them through to the consultation itself. Now, one thing that is brand new that you would have never had within MediSoft is the facility of utilising what we refer to as exam shortcuts. And the easiest way to explain what exam shortcuts are within MediSight is if you maybe see a particular sort of type of patient, or let's say, for example, finding for maybe an adult normal exam. So you see a lot of patients, and then they're depending on the eye that you're going, they might just sort of record a normal exam. All right, we can create shortcuts for these particular types of scenarios. And instead of you having to go through and record those findings, the exact same findings every single time, we can create a shortcut for you. Which means all you've got to do is simply click on the eye that you want to apply that shortcut to, whether it be right, left, or both. Then that will pull through all of those findings in one fell swoop for you. All right, so I clicked on one shortcut and it pulled through 6 findings for me. So that obviously, we don't just have to do it for normal exams. I've got specifically ones here for AMD, medical retina, glaucoma, cataract, thyroid eye disease. The sort of the possibilities are endless. So if you have any scenarios where you have particular types of patients, and you think, well, whenever I see a patient, I have sort of think that they may have AMD or RVO, I will always record this minimum data set of findings. What we can do is we can create a shortcut for that scenario, which means all you've got to do is click on that shortcut and it will apply all those findings for you in one fell swoop.
Sure. Those can only be done as a department, can't they? They're in the system configs.
So yeah, so what we do is no. So we initially lock it down so that we can do it for you. But I mentioned the phrase super user, but when it comes closer to go live, we will also internally train super users that will have access to be able to create these exam shortcuts. One thing that we find with customers that works really well is if we have maybe one super user per subspecialty, then that super user within that subspecialty can be in control of creating the shortcuts in the system. Now, it's entirely up to you as a trust if you want to give every single clinician their own shortcut. That's entirely down to you. What I find works best is if maybe you have a few different shortcuts per subspecialty, and from there, a clinician can choose whether they want that particular shortcut or if they don't. All right, so that tends to I find it works the best. If you want to give every single clinician a separate shortcut, that's fine, but it can become quite messy. So see how you can keep on top of that. But either way, the main thing to take away from this is exam shortcuts massively speed up the time it takes to record these findings. So yeah, we can sort of utilize these and go through these in further detail when it comes to specific training. But that's findings. So the next stage would theoretically be you telling the system what the patient's diagnosis is. So obviously this isn't mandatory, but this is just how I would sort of see a standard pathway, how it would function. So from here, you've got what you're currently used to on MediSoft, which has come through to a particular part of the eye or particular finding, sorry, you would right click on it and then indicate it as a diagnosis. The only thing that changes or differs is now you left click, and then from here you can then click on the option DX and it will mark it as a diagnosis. That's one way of recording diagnoses. We also have this specific diagnosis section, which will show you all of the applicable findings that could be upgraded to a patient's diagnosis for you. So you've also got that option as well. You can just flat out manually add a diagnosis into the system by clicking on add new diagnoses. This is similar to the problem section that I showed you earlier, which it splits up into subspecialty, but you can also search for the related diagnosis that you're looking for as well and add it in. All right. Diagrams, I can briefly show you diagrams. We have a couple of really good diagrams within the system, depending on the eyes that you're recording it for. So if it's both, we have things like face and neck muscles, ocular movements. You can record ptosis, visual field confrontation, orthoptic grids. In terms of per eye, you can set up things like anterior segment. We have some really good ones for the macular and retinal. And you can pull these through, and you have these specific related icons that you can pull through and apply. Unfortunately, these icons only apply to the macular and the retinal diagram. we are working on improving all our diagrams within the system, but unfortunately not all our diagrams have this sort of utility. But yeah, it's worth demonstrating, and we are obviously trying to sort of update the system as much as we can. So hopefully we can get to a point where all of our diagrams have this sort of functionality within it. But if you work within medical retina, DR, yeah, you have this sort of facility here. All right, and the good thing is the system can actually generate diagrams based on the findings that you recorded as well. So if I had recorded the fact that my patient had a macular hole in the right eye, if I tried creating a diagram in the right eye, it would automatically pull through that macular hole for me. All right. And if you had previous diagrams recorded in the system, you could just pull them through as well. So just be wary of that. Oh, yeah. I don't know what time. I think I was doing it till 5, so I can try and sort of not wrap it up, but try and speed run through some other stuff if you want. But I don't know if what time are we booked it? I think we booked in until 5. No, I guess people obviously don't want to stay till 5. If I try and aim to finish, for half 4, would that be okay for everyone? Absolutely, yeah. I can run through some specific orthoptic stuff. Like I said, I do apologise for sort of the going through of this. It's quite hard to sort of time these things when we've got questions and things like that. But just be sort of wary that this is more of a demo today of how the system works. We will be doing some specific or subspecialty related training when it comes through to go live. But in terms of orthoptics, I can absolutely show you the orthoptic assessment, where it exists, where it resides. And if we've got some time left over, I can quickly show you a couple of operation encounters as well. So same with any encounter, click on create new, and then we've got this specific orthoptic assessment encounter that exists within the system. This might be a bit skew with for my patient as they're not a child or not even been seen in strabismus before, but hopefully we should be able to see some things. Yeah, so obviously we've seen everything else in terms of history, but we do actually have the ocular motility tab where from here you can generate, go through your ocular motility entry. So we've got things like the cover test, measurements, the ocular motility entry itself. So I can demonstrate some things here. So we've got things like the test conditions themselves. These exist at the top, and regardless of what you're in, whether it's the cover test, measurements, tilts, the test conditions all remain at the top, so it's streamlined throughout all of it. But you've got numerous different options here. You can specify things like distance, correction. If your patient has any contact lens, you can sort of add these in here that this is the cover test that you're recording with a contact lens in. You've got your clip-on prisms, fixing eyes, head postures. If you diagnostically occlude your patients, then you can document that. You've got the target, how bad their vision is. But from here, it is just a case of sort of doing your cover test, and you've got the different tests at the top. You've got up to 10 different tests that you can record. You can rename them, similar to what I've done here. I've renamed a couple of mine. I have a very basic cover test. I do like an unaided near and an unaided distance. So I can go through and record some of that stuff here. So if I go through and say that maybe unaided near, we can say that they have a slight exophoria with good recovery. Let's move on to the different tests. And if I say do it in the distance, we can change slight to maybe more moderate, and we can say it's a permanent drift in the left eye, and they have double vision. So that might be quite a basic cover test that you would record. You've got this display tab. So from here, it will give you a display of the information that you recorded as almost like a brief overview. Measurements works in a similar fashion. The only thing that really differs in terms of the test conditions is you can specify the method it is that you're using, whether it's prism cover test, Synoptophore, Hirschberg's, Krinsky, but everything else primarily remains the same. So let's try and do some other sort of basic measurements here. So let's maybe say once again in the near, we could maybe say once again it's only an exophoria, and there is only let's say 20. So 20 diopters, and then we maybe sort of move to the distance, and we can maybe say it's more severe. So it's a permanent drift in the left eye once again, and we can say at primary, we can say, let's say 30. And then from here, you can do your different sort of positions of gaze as well. So if we do in the elevation, and we maybe say it's worse in elevation, permanent drift in the left eye, maybe in depression, it's not as bad. So we could maybe say, what do I do there? Let's say, oh, that'd be crazy. Permanent drift in the left eye. All right, so once again, you can use the display, and from there it will display all the information that you record. It will throw you up a warning straight away to indicate a particular alphabet pattern that had been recorded for your patient. So if we jump through to ocular motility from here, it will indicate a Y pattern that has been input for our patient based on their divergence from sort of depending on sort of the position of gaze that we're utilizing. But these can be overridden. So if you want to utilize and maybe override this and input like a basic V pattern or A pattern, you can do. In terms of specific stuff that's worth noting for child patients is, well, I mean, first things first, you can just default full movement. So if your patient's eye movements are generally okay, you can just default full movement, and that's absolutely fine. You have this appears grossly full button. So if you don't want to stake your reputation that this child who has been wriggling for the past half an hour, all their different restrictions are absolutely fine, then you can indicate that maybe it appears grossly full. I'm not 100% sure because they wouldn't sit still. So you can indicate that as well. In terms of things like drifts and shoots, you can input these into the system, depending on what it is that you want to input. So whether it be a drift, and all you need to do is simply move your cursor depending on the section of the eye that you want to input this drift for. All right, so if we say an internal drift, you can also do shoots as well, so it's more of a sharp one. You can override these by just clicking on the section again and just clicking on it and remove. So if we maybe input some drifts for our patient internally in their eye. If you want to record any restrictions of eye movement, you can do. So say, for example, we maybe say -3 and -1. You can document restrictions of movements. You can also do it across the top as well. So if we say, once again, -3 and -1, you could also record these sorts of restrictions. All right, once again, you can go through and document anything regarding each part of the eye as well. You've got 1,000 characters per eye. And once you've completed the ocular motility, you just click on done and that will pull it through. I do appreciate that was a very whirlwind tour of ocular motility, but we will do some straps and peds stuff later on in the year. We do also have some other specific related orthoptist activities. We have a convergence and accommodation where you can record obviously convergence and accommodation. We have your binocular single vision and your different grades of binocular single vision from correspondence through to stereopsis. All right. Once again, you can record findings as well. You've got the plan section. There may be other activities here that don't initially appear. We can add them to it, whether it be, I would presume that orthoptists would do this, and then maybe you'd have an optom that would go through and record refraction and things like that. Or do you guys, I presume you guys don't do refraction, do you, as an orthoptist? No, that's fine. So we can set up an assessment specifically within Straps and Peds that is just for your optom. So your optom can record findings, their rec crosses and things like that. All right. That was the question, yeah. So what we can do is we can set up this is why I don't like to call it the nurse assessment, because different roles can utilize it. So how I would set it up is I would obviously have my orthoptists utilize the orthoptic assessment, and I would set up the standard assessment for my optoms to use. So within there, you could have findings, you can have your refraction, so you can record your rec crosses. You can even have the plan section where from there you can go and plan in further visits or anything like that. So that's how I would utilize it within the strabismus pathway.
Like MPT, where you've got like two clinicians
Yeah.
feeding back off each other.
Yeah.
So you have two letters going out there.
We can turn letters on for whether I would do you orthoptists. What we can actually do is at the end of the day, how I tend to see it is the consultation or the consultant. If the consultant sees the patient after either the orthoptist or either the optom, that they would create the letter, but it doesn't matter. However you want it to set it up, we can set it up. So if you want it so the orthoptist can create a letter and the optom, then we can do that, but we can also just make it so that only one particular user role creates a letter. It's entirely up to you how you want to set it up. Yep. Okay. Yeah. So that's fine. So this may be a case where what I would probably suggest is, because you can actually pull, this may sound complicated to explain, but The orthoptic assessment, and specifically the ocular motility, it's huge. Ocular motility entry is huge. We can't pull it on to any other. It's not like refraction and VA where we could just pull it across to another assessment or anything like that. It has to specifically stay in the orthoptic assessment. So what I would suggest in terms of a pathway is maybe if you tasked the orthoptist with creating the letter, your retinoscopy and any findings would pull through to the orthoptic assessment. That could be one way of doing it. So only one letter gets generated, or you can separate them out. Entirely up to you in terms of how you want to work. We can facilitate however it is that you want to move forward. It might be best to sort of try and think of a internal process that would work. And then from there, we can make sure that we set up the system so it works exactly how you want it to. Yes. Yep. Yep.
We've like completed our assessment there. Can we then go back into the same
Yep.
assessment and just?
Yeah, I'm guessing that will be within the hour or couple of hours. Yeah, so that's fine. You have 24 hours theoretically until that document gets locked. But just like we said regarding the exporting of data, just be wary of that. But either way, you can go in and edit your document once it's been produced. All right, so just conscious of time, what I'll do is, like I said, anything else regarding anything strabismus or orthoptis related, we will be running some specific orthoptis session. Oh, yes. Yeah.
Say that Helen's got some extra videos and stuff that she's looking into. You will get orthops specific stuff how to do it rather than sharing it all today.
Okay.
Because Helen has to work that out.
And can I just?
Yes.
Is there a contact lens? Because there is at the moment, is there a contact lens pulled through from MediSight to MediSight?
In terms of contact lens, we are sort of lacking in that department in terms of what facility we do have, but that's at the time. So, like I said, we have this on the go live date. I'm not sure. I couldn't tell you what, because you will have two different new versions when it comes to August. So you'll have this version that's coming now, and you'll have another version that's coming in July. So 2 versions from now, you may actually have that as an option. But in terms of contact lens, at this very moment, we don't have the greatest of facility in terms of specific related stuff like that. All right. Right, let me demonstrate. Like I said, what I'll do is I'll just demonstrate a particular operation encountered for this scenario. Let me jump back through to, actually, let me just quickly plan in some phaco surgery. And then what we can then do from there is I can show you the operation template in terms of how it exists. There we go. Right, so same with any other encounter, what you would do is you would create new and then select the option operation. It will show you all the operations that have been planned in for your patient. And what I will do, just to finish off for today, I'll briefly show you some templates in terms of how they exist. So we have the specific phaco related or cataract related procedure, which, as you can see, shows you the majority of information, things like anesthesia, factors increasing surgical difficulty. Now, one thing we always like to make aware, if you currently already have any surgeon defaults within Medisoft, these will migrate across through to MediSight, so you don't need to worry about having to recreate them or anything like that. I guess specific related to cataracts, I can demonstrate today sort of selecting the lens from the biometry, how seamless it is to do. So this biometry has been recorded the same way, nothing changes in terms of how you're currently recording it. If we do have any technicians in, you'll record it, export it, and instead of exporting through to MediSoft, it exports through to MediSight. But in terms of you as the surgeon, you come through and select your lens from biometry. It will have their own inbuilt calculator within the system. So from here, you can I don't know how clearly you can say this, but it is actually suggesting a lens for me. We will input the certain selections by default. We'll have like a default setup in terms of formulas and IOL models, but these can be changed. The current formulas that we have in the system are Haigis, Hoffer-Q, Holiday, and SRKT. We are working on Barrett. It's just some conversations being had regarding pricing, about how much they want to charge us for actually utilizing the formula. That's as much as I know. But in terms of formulas, I don't know if you use Barrett. But if you don't, then great. You don't have to worry about that conversation. These are the formulas that you use or we have, and you can sort of chop and change between the formulas. And as you can see, as I change the formula, it will sort of give me or change the lens it is that I'm selecting. So this lens data is based on the biometry data that's been recorded, and you can chop and change models if needs be. But all you would theoretically do as a cataract clinician is come in and select the lens it is that you're using, click on finalize. That will then jump you back through to the operation counter, showing you an overview and showing you the information that you recorded. So my model, my power, and my predicted refraction. And from there, it's just a case of recording the rest of the information. So things like factors increase in surgical difficulty and operative complications. All right, if you do need to add these in, you can obviously add these in. If you want to maybe input that there was some IOL in the vitreous, you can document these things. It only gives you the option of sort of specifying free text comments, but you can do that. All right, and then I sort of didn't get a chance to show you within the consultation the planned comment section, but this planned section works exactly the same way as what it does in the consultation. This is where you would document your patient's outcome. All right, so whether it be a discharge summary from the operation, whether it be a management plan from the consultation, whether it's a plan within the orthoptic assessment, regardless, this is where you would document your patient's outcome. All right, let's just make a brief test comment.
There's 5,000 characters.
Yep.
Is that the same in all plans?
Yep, 5,000 characters. And it's spell check as well. It sounds really trivial, actually. We're in 2024, and when we have a lot of implementation customers who are coming from paper to this system, and we say, "Oh, this system's got spell check," they almost laugh at us because they're like, "Well, yeah, it's 2024. It should have spell check." But obviously, MediSoft didn't. So that's the reason why we mention it, is the fact that obviously in MediSight we have spell check. A lot of the times with our current MediSoft customers, they have to type things up in Word, spell check it, and then copy and paste it in. It's a whole situation. But yeah, everything's spell check. Yeah, 5,000 characters and everything spell checked in here as well. So little wins. Yeah, but yes, 5,000 characters. Okay, so if there was no biometry, then an option here which would be input the lens details, and you would just have to manually enter the model, the power, and the predicted refraction it is that you're using.
So you can do that in MediSight.
Yeah.
MediSight refuses.
No, you can override it. Yeah. If I was to have had a patient which didn't have a biometry, I can quickly show that now. This patient don't have a biometry. So if I was to create an operation for phaco surgery, I don't think this patient's got a biometry. Hopefully they haven't. Yeah, so enter lens details, and you could just say biometry not complete / available, give them a reason why. You could say records not available, and then from there, just manually enter the power and the predicted refraction. All right. I'll probably, due to time, I'll probably not go over too much with letters today, as there's a whole host of different things that I can go over with letters in terms of pulling particular templates through, pro formas, sentences and all that. So that may be something that what we'll probably do is we'll probably document that within, or go over that within the specific subspecialty related stuff.
Can I just ask one other?
Yes.
At the moment, we rely on the cataract summary sheet in MediSoft.
Okay.
How do you get it?
So when you say summary sheet, what the previous?
So it literally prints out the measurements that you're going to use in biometry.
Yeah.
A bit of medical history, risk factors,
Oh, okay.
and then it shows you what lens you're going to put in, where your incision's going to be.
Okay, that is a good question. I don't think I've ever had that. I didn't know. So MediSoft currently has that facility of a cataract summary. That might be one that I'll take away and look into and get back to you, Alan, regarding that, because I'm not aware of that. You should have the facility of doing it, absolutely. It should just be a case of just extracting a particular clinical note that's recorded that information, or maybe just extracting it as an audit somewhere, but it should definitely be feasible. But yeah, I'll get back to you.
Thank you.
So due to time, what I'll do is I've got, like I said, I hope to finish at 4:30 just for your guys' sake. Do I have any final questions before we wrap up for the day? Yes. Yep. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. That's fine. We have all those in the system. So we can actually specify the milligram of the injection it is, whether it's 2 or 8, regardless of it. For example, within Avastin, we have all the different types of milligrams. But yeah, it does actually specify the different milligrams it is that you use. In terms of what Alan also wanted to see, notes, you can generate notes within the system. I've set it up within the general pathway, so you have this specific note, and this can be used for documenting things like phone calls made, phone calls received, any sort of management plan it is that you want to create. And then what we can actually do is we can actually create it so you can have the opportunity of whether you want to produce a letter or not. So this particular thing here that I'm showing you is what we refer to as letter generation, and we only input it a few patches ago, and it gives you the option of specifying exactly what letter template it is that you want to sort of use, or if you want to even produce a letter or not. You can also just select no letters required. Now, the main primary reason we created this was specifically for virtual review, and do apologise the fact that we haven't had time to go over that today, but within virtual review, when it comes to actually signing off of the virtual review document, it gives the opportunity of specifying exactly what letter template it is that you want to use, whether it's maybe a monitoring, maybe it's a discharge, maybe it's a procedure that you want to plan in. So the system does have the facility of utilising this letter generation and giving you the option of whether you want to produce a letter or not. And if you do want to produce a letter, actually giving you the option of specifying exactly what letter template it is that you want to use. So the system does have that facility. In the same sense, I could have just clicked finalise and it would have just auto shot me through to the letter, and from there I could have gone through and started editing my letter. But yeah, so I guess if we've got no other questions, then we can wrap it up. I will leave my email address as well. So if anybody wants to ask me any sort of specific MediSight related stuff between now and go live, you are more than welcome. If I can't answer your question, I'll find an expert that can. All right, I appreciate your time for today. And like I said, I do apologise the fact that I haven't been able to go over everything that I'd hoped to go over. It's just how it is when it comes to face-to-face training. But yeah, just be aware that we will be running some specific subspecialty related and even user role related training when it comes through to go live. All right, so thank you for your time. Yeah, thank you very much. You're free to go. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday.